This edition of Pancakes and Politics Overdrive is proudly sponsored by Business Leaders for Michigan, the state's business roundtable, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, education, widely shared prosperity, and a healthy economy.
The point of Pancakes and Politics Overdrive is to really extend the conversation to important topics that impact people here in Southeastern Michigan. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by the General Manager of SMART, Mr. Dwight Ferrell. How are you this morning?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. Want to first off congratulate you on being the president of our 2024 Michigan Chronicles Mid of Excellence class.
I appreciate it. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, we like to make sure that we have strong leaders as part of that class, just to be able to continue the work. And one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on to speak with us about regional transit in Southeastern Michigan is because it's such a huge topic right now. Such a huge topic, the state of regional transit in Southeastern Michigan, with the state being so focused on job creation and growth and 21st century mobility efforts. Give us kind of an overview of what the state of Michigan's transit is right now.
I'll give you a perspective. When I started in this business long ago, people were focused on having maid routes so that maids could get to work in the affluent areas of whatever city. In the early 80s, regions started to recognize that to be competitive, they had to invest in transit. And so those cities that invested in transit have seen amazing growth in that time frame. And so that's where I think that the fact that you have big business leaders, because there have been other Pancakes and Politics, actually the ones that are in person, that have talked to business leaders that have talked about the importance of transit. So when business gets it, that really kind of makes it easier, for lack of a better term, to do it. Because really it's about access to jobs. And how people go about getting there is very different today than years ago.
I want to touch real quickly on what you just mentioned about how business leaders and elected officials have put a huge focus on improved mobility and improved transit, particularly in Southeastern Michigan here, where we're seeing this major economic boom happening in the city of Detroit. One of the state's major efforts is focusing on growth and retention, particularly with millennials and Gen Z. How frequently are you brought into those conversations to be an expert on how important of a notion regional transit is to help with those efforts?
In the almost 3 years I've been here, within the last, say, year and a half, more business leaders are wanting to talk to me. And so that's a good thing. And you've seen that even at the state level, they're trying to find different ways to be able to fund it and what have you. So there's clearly an emphasis on transit. But one of the things that I try to get people to see is that how people in my generation saw transit is different than how a millennial or a Gen Z sees transit.
Absolutely.
So the whole quality of life concept is very, very different. A case in point, most of the time people look at transit as just somebody gets on the bus and they're just staring straight ahead and that's all they do. Well, people who are in the generations behind me see this as a way to be able to maximize their time, to do things they can't do in a car. And they can do things with their money they can't do if they have a car. So while I am on this 30-minute bus ride or however long the bus ride is, or on a train or what have you. I could be looking at a movie. I could be listening to a podcast. I could be doing things I cannot do if I am driving. I could be asleep, which obviously I can't. So it's a quality of life thing. So that's very different. And when you look at the cost of car ownership,
particularly in southeastern Michigan,
anywhere, but we can use southeastern Michigan for an example. I want to do other things with my money other than on a car that sits. We have to start taking a look about things that we put in place that we may not see. We may not personally have a benefit from it today. So I'll give you an example. Eisenhower was president when the interstate system started. Eisenhower was long out of office and dead before that thing finally got done. So think about it. You're not going to be all of a sudden to just rain down this massive transit system out of the air, but there's a way to be able to do it. And mass transit, which is the term that kind of gets talked about, is really about moving lots of people over big expanses of space. And that's typically done multimodally. So by that I mean you've got buses, trains, and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at Philadelphia, for example, that's mass transit because they got light rail, heavy rail, commuter rail, buses, trolleys, they got the gamut. So those places like that are more competitive.
For attracting talent.
Absolutely. So if you look at what businesses were looking for 20 years ago, you could entice them with a tax abatement for some land out somewhere, and they'd build a complex in the suburbs, and people would drive to it. Well, that's changing.
Particularly speaking, again, about what we see here in southeastern Michigan and have for, the last 100 years. Mass transit is in direct competition with the automotive industry. Or so it has historically been kind of aligned, right? But how do we see the future of these multimodal forms of transportation working in collaboration to improve the environment for potential residents?
Well, I think that the idea that transit and cars can't coexist is you can't build enough roads. There are places who've tried it and their traffic is not good.
Mm-hmm.
There are large cities in the United States who've invested heavily in roads. And those places, when they talk about how long it takes to get somewhere, they don't talk about miles, they talk about time.
Right.
But those places that have invested in transit and improved their road infrastructure, the traffic is not nearly as bad. And they are able to attract talent. So let's just say the timing is right for Southeast Michigan. You talked about the automobile. Well, one of the things that's unique about Southeast Michigan is all the infrastructure that was put in place for the automobile. Well, you don't have the same demand on some of the very large streets, like Gratiot and Woodward Avenue, and Michigan Avenue, and Grand River, and all of those places.
And that happens naturally through, we've lost a lot of population.
We lost a lot of population, but that infrastructure is ideal for mass transit. Not necessarily about putting trains in, because the environment is very different now in terms of funding from the federal government to do that. But there's something, and we'll be putting out more examples of what this actually looks like in the coming months, is fixed guideway BRT. So imagine a dedicated right-of-way, but it's done with buses, electric buses like the one we're on now. So you can get the speed that you can get from rail at a lot less cost and move people over large distances.
What do you think is taking so long to implement that?
Well, first of all, as I stated, there has to be a will to do it. And I can't explain what happened, over the last however many years, and I don't even want to speculate on it. But what I can say is that the potential for the future is there. And a lot of it has to do with something as simple as educating people on what the options are.
What happens if more communities, particularly ones that, like, we're discussing here about Southeastern Michigan, what risks do these communities run by not taking the next step into becoming more mass transit friendly?
No growth. Slow, very slow growth, if at all. Southeast Michigan has it has talent. You got businesses, but the things that people are looking for from an employer and where they live is different than when it was when I was younger. Okay? I wasn't concerned about hours, I was concerned about money and benefits. Okay? And I had a house in the suburbs at one point. Well, now people are looking at, if I'm going to go here, what's my quality of life going to be like that? And my quality of life is more about how things are going to help me for what I do off the job than on the job.
Yep.
And so people have to understand that transit's delivered differently today. People's travel patterns are different than what they once were. And the pandemic has certainly changed that. So you still have a number of people who are working from home. You have people, if they can't work from home, they're going to quit and go find a job where they can work from home. So you're not going to see these big AM and PM peaks where people are coming into downtown anywhere. And that's been the case across the country. The systems that have rail ridership, most of them maybe have 75% of their pre-COVID ridership. That's best case scenario. Will they ever get to 100%? It may be, but it's going to be some time. So that doesn't mean that there's not a need for transit. It's just how do we do it differently? So like now we have some pilots where basically you use an app to book a trip, like Uber. So there's going to be more of that. We've done some studies that indicate most people don't go more than about 5 miles from where they live.
Right.
Especially now. And so we'll have to change over time to be able to support that.
I want to just kind of get your 10,000 foot perspective on the state of transit 1 year from now in Southeastern Michigan, 5 years from now in Southeastern Michigan, and then cap it off with a 10-year. And when I say your perspective from these, I want to hear you talk a little bit about what major milestones you think you might hit along each of those 3 different time frames.
Well, over that time frame, we'll be diversifying the fleet to reflect how we serve it.
Tell me where this flows: 1 year, 5 year, 10 year.
Well,
and these can be aspirational too.
Well, what's going to happen in the next year is really the things that put in the foundation. So, for example, we have a bus stop study that we're doing right now to examine where all of our bus stops are. Okay? We're also going to be looking at ways on how we can increase our small business participation and disadvantaged business participation over that same time frame so that, we can spread these public dollars around.
So year one essentially looks like finding understanding, getting better understanding.
And so the other thing is we have to be able to articulate in a way that people can understand this is the real impact of transit. So instead of talking about, let's put some facts behind what I say.
Got it.
So we're going to be working on to be able to show people about how you benefit from transit even if you don't use it in your pocket. They don't understand the mechanics of a business coming to a region and building a plant or an office building or whatever the case may be, all the money that goes into whatever that city or county is, and how that helps offset their property tax.
So year one, like we said, is kind of laying the foundation of understanding.
So
Year 5, what does that look like?
year 5 is us actually putting in, or have started to put in, putting in mass transit, if you will, that's beyond just a bus going up and down the street. So I could see the expansion of microtransit, but I can also see where you would have fixed guideway BRT that connects these expansive areas. So, and then once you start that, then that's just something that will just take it until you're finally done with it. And having been in places before, this could be a decades long effort to do. So one of you were talking about the between year 1 and year 5, a lot of it is just educating people and making sure that they have reasonable expectations. There's gonna be a lot more outreach over the next year, 2, 3 years with business, elected leaders, stakeholders, key stakeholders, for people to be able to understand. Part of what we have to be able to do is show people who don't use it that the invisible people they don't think about when they go somewhere, they're not going to have that service they want at whatever place they go if the employees can't get there.
We've been hearing for more than a decade here in the area about light rail from Detroit to Ann Arbor, light rail from Detroit to Chicago. What does that look like, and is that a feasible option for people to believe that, we'll have improved transit options from here to other major cities within the region?
So light rail, typically powered overhead, is really about connecting a region. You can do that. Heavy rail subways like you see in Washington, D.C. and New York, they cover even greater distances. Now, if you're trying to connect cities, that's a different kind of rail. Now, I'll just say this. We haven't really educated people on the what and the why. So, service to the disabled, paratransit, that's disabled. It has nothing to do with about you being a senior. You could be senior and disabled, but if you're a senior and not disabled, you can't use that service. Okay? So that's just an example of some things here that people are not quite aware of. And really being able to get people to see how technology can be used to do this differently. Can you have rail between here and Chicago? Of course you could. Yes, you could. If there's you have to be able to show that there's a need for it.
Dwight, I want to talk to you about some of the new and improved modes of transportation, mass transit, that have recently been introduced here in Detroit. We've got improved people mover services. We've got improved queue line services. We've got the Detroit to Ann Arbor bus that runs daily. We've got the DAX bus that runs from downtown Detroit to the airport. We've got improved smart services that connects cities across the region. Why have these transit initiatives been so widely adopted, and how have you seen the immediate impact in positive ways for people?
Well, first of all, jobs don't know boundaries. I can live in one county, shop in a different county, and work in another one. Getting people to understand that is going to be huge. What I see in the future is what we want to certainly be part of is from a customer perspective, ease of use. So it's irrelevant to us who the provider is if we can connect. So if you want to go to the airport and we can make it easier for you to come downtown and transfer to the DAX to go to the airport, so be it. Yeah, the people mover. We're going to take a look at how we as SMART can go about feeding it better. In other words, how we can serve it so that people can come downtown and then they can circulate around that. So really it is about how you use technology to make a seamless service. The customer doesn't care. I just know that I'm going to go from here and let's do that.
So building some interconnectivity between the modes.
Right. So one of the things that we're going back to, right now we have under development an app that will allow us to be able to provide real-time information and trip planning capabilities and fare payment into the same thing.
That's going to be a game changer.
You think about it today, you could take your phone out today and book a ticket to fly from here to anywhere in the world with your phone. Pay for it.
Okay.
Then you can use a ride service like Uber or Lyft to take you to the airport. Now you haven't used a desktop and you've used no cash. And to be clear, we have to make it so, and it's easier to do than it once was, for even those people who are unbanked to use the system. There's a misconception out there that there are people who have to pay with cash because they have no choice. That's just not true. There are countless prepaid Visa debit cards that people have taken upon themselves to do because they recognize that. If you are on any kind of government assistance, they're not going to send you a check. That's not going to happen. So you have to have some kind of way in order to be able to get your dollars. And so a lot of what we're talking about is just educating people and trying to do away with some old stereotypes in terms of how people think.
And I think it's opportunities like this that really do allow people to become more educated, Dwight. And
absolutely. The bus that we're on is 100% electric. This is not diesel. This bus is 100% electric.
And it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride. And I want to wrap it up here, but just one last takeaway for the people. Why should people care about the impact of mass transit?
Well, here's what I would say to you is, do you care about your pocket?
I think you're going to get 100% yeses on that question.
Okay. So, the more jobs and businesses to come to a region, everybody benefits. I don't care where you are on the socioeconomic strata. Everybody benefits. For most of the people who are Michigan Chronicle subscribers, their biggest investment is the homes that they own. And for a lot of people, that's how they generate, generational wealth, by passing it on to their children. Their children may have bought another house, but this is a house that you can rent out, you can do whatever. It's a supply and demand kind of thing. So when people come in, your property values go up. Now your taxes go up too, but you can't have it both ways. So this really is a money conversation. Transit's the great equalizer. It's not a social service conversation. I'll leave it with this. When Amazon was looking for a location for its second headquarters, every region in America, including this one, wanted those jobs. Because those were well-paying jobs. There were going to be a bunch of them. These were not warehouse jobs, okay? One of the criteria was mass transit. There are probably 15 regions in the country that have mass transit that met that criteria, but they got a whole lot more applications than that.
They absolutely did.
I tell people often, I said, the CEO of a private company has one responsibility: increase shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't increase shareholder value, they're not gonna stay CEO. And the people who do these jobs today have a different requirement than they did 20, 30 years ago. So now, instead of me having to own 2 cars, I can have one. Now, think about it this way. That money that gets spent
Goes right back into the economy.
right. See, that's more turnover than on a car. And so people are spending things on things now that they weren't spending on before because they got it tied up into an asset. Now let's get real. General Motors is no longer the largest manufacturer of automobiles in the world. That's just fact. People are getting their driver's license later. That's fact. If at all. Vehicle registrations are down in total, in even places that are growing. Because people are making decisions about where they live as it relates to access. 20 years ago, walkability wasn't a term. If I want to walk to the grocery store, so where I live right now, I can walk to a grocery store in a mile. And there are a lot of benefits to doing that. And I don't have to use that $3.87 a gallon gas to do it. There were cities that used to shut down at 5 o'clock on Fridays, and they'd open back again on Mondays. Downtown Detroit has more activity on the weekend than it does through the week. That's different. And so it's really just trying to get people to be able to see, for lack of a better term, a new world order.
Well, Dwight, this has been a fascinating conversation. As always, with Pancakes and Politics Overdrive, we love to bring you the experts' understanding and make some of these difficult conversations a little bit more palatable, some of these hard to understand conversations a little bit more palatable. But again, this has been a great conversation with Dwight Ferrell, General Manager of Smart. Thanks for joining us, Dwight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.